Hey everyone, Rob here, and welcome to Aftercast. This is the Aftercast conversation that's a companion to our Season 2 Episode 1 premiere featuring Kate Bush and her 1985 album, The Hounds of Love. Now, Aftercast is something new we're doing this season. We're capturing the conversations we have as they immediately follow from wrapping our regular season episodes and releasing them as exclusive Patreon bonus episode content that supporters can access on our brand new Sonic Ventures podcast Patreon support page. We're making this first Aftercast episode free and accessible to all our listeners through all your regular streaming platforms, but all future Aftercasts will only be available to subscribers on the Patreon gateway. We've got lots of things happening for Season 2, including the launch of our new website, sonicventurespodcast.com, where we'll be hosting articles and pieces of writing by both Joël and I that everyone can access and read. And along with the bonus Aftercast episodes that will be available exclusively on Patreon, we'll be releasing additional bonus audio segments called Vignettes and Wild Cards. The first of these will be free to access as well, but like Aftercasts, will thereafter be exclusive for our patrons on Patreon. Now, what exactly is an Aftercast? Well, Aftercast is recorded as a continuation of the conversation at the conclusion of our regular podcast discussion. As such, it exists in a universe where Joël and I, inspired by having already spoken about the album we're featuring, can continue talking without being burdened by some of the structural necessities of building the conversation and introducing ideas that we have to consider in our regular episode conversations. We're more freely able to explore tangents or dig deeper into ideas or points of interest already raised that we want to explore further. We can break some of the rules here and open things up a little bit more, even things about ourselves and our lives that might not make it into the regular discussion. We're not sure what Aftercasts will be or become because we've only recorded one, but we spent the whole of Season 1 having these Aftercast discussions. We just never thought to capture them on the mic. And a little secret, there are some Aftercast discussions that we've enjoyed more than the episodes that inspired them. So here it is, Aftercast, in all its post-conversational glory for your listening pleasure. And if you find you dig it, send us an email to sonicventurespodcast@gmail.com or visit our website and let us know. And if you want more, please consider subscribing and supporting by becoming a patron on Patreon. Many thanks and enjoy.
Yes.
Post-discussion.
So while I was reading A Book of Dreams and listening to this album, and I said, it was a very interesting experience, and I'm still processing it. That was one thing that I really didn't know if I really got across in the episode because there were so many things I was excited to talk about, but the processing of reading this book and listening to this album is still going on for me. And it's really interesting that the version, the copy of A Book of Dreams that I read is the 2015 republication of it.
Okay.
You'd be lucky to find an original print. I couldn't find it. And if I wanted it, I would have had to probably paid a lot for it. So I got the 2015 publication of Book of Dreams, which on the cover has a picture of the cloud busting machine from the video that Kate Bush made.
Okay.
And it also says the book that inspired the song Cloud Busting, which I thought already was interesting.
Yeah.
In the book, Peter Reich, very good writer, in the 2015 publication, there's the original intro that he wrote, and then he wrote a new 2015 publication intro. It's incredibly well written. He does a very good job at, in a way, showing you where he's come to with what has happened in his life. And there is, at the end of his intro, there's this thing that he wrote that I want to read and talk about.
Sure.
So I don't know. Well, maybe I should give a little. How much do you know about Wilhelm Reich?
I know, I haven't refreshed what I know about him very much, but I used to know a fair amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So for the sake of time, anyone who's interested, I suggest you just do a quick search on Wilhelm Reich, and I'll give you some context for his work.
Yeah.
But what's important to note, I think, about him is that he was the second generation after Freud and Jung, which apparently, by many accounts, was kind of an open field of psychotherapy. There was a lot of different things that were going on. There was a lot of experimentation. And so his son, Peter Reich, was with him through a lot of, through that. And in the book, you do see a lot of genuine expressions of their relationship mixed in with childhood perspectives and just trying to find meaning, trying to find understanding, and trying to understand self and others.
Yeah.
So in the intro at the end, this is what Peter Reich wrote. He said, wait, before I read this, I should just to help. Wilhelm Reich believed in what's called orgone.
Yes.
It's a type of energy, fundamental energy. That's a very simplistic explanation of it. So this is what Peter Reich wrote. He said, yes, I am open to the possibility of a life energy, a force connecting all things that will prove to be far less than what it is believed by the devout, and a great deal more than can be measured or quantified in any way by a scientist. This observation about Isaac Newton and gravity summarizes the way I see it. Newton was able to imagine this black magic moving the apple because, as one biographer admiringly writes, he embraced invisible forces. That is to say, Newton embraced invisible forces. And Newton did so more promiscuously than we choose to remember. The inventor of modern gravity was also a fanatical alchemist. It's just that in the case of universal gravitation, the invisible force he embraced turned out to be real. So when I read that, it really brought another dynamic to this album for me. And it actually made me zero in even more on this concept of love. That the force of love that we experience, that we share, doesn't come with this these clear parameters, these clear distinctions of this is what love is, this is how you do it, this is what it feels like. It comes within the magnitude of a person, like yourself and other people. So reading this quote made me, which was interesting because this is after the albums have been made. This is 2015. But I felt that there's something in this quote that was happening for me listening to this album, that there's something about the thing about loving somebody and then the halo of other stuff that comes with it. And I really wanted to read this quote to you in the context of this, because I'm curious to see what impression it has for you. I know it's coming out of a book you haven't read.
Sure.
So that might be a little unfair, but
right. There's in sort of popular psychology or metaphysics, in pop psychology, we'll call it. There's that point in sort of a freshman discussion where when people are talking about life and meaning and different things, and someone will say, but what about love? Sort of as the, like, Yes. What about love is kind of this sort of surface level, but pop psychology kind of attempt to show that the world is more than a reducible set of qualities or elements. And for what I liked about that quote is I loved how he positioned it between, it would be less than the devout, like much less than the devout, but much more than those, that were seeking to measure it, even if it was measurable to a degree that it's still more than that, but much less than what the crazies think it is, which is a characterization. Sorry, but
that's why I liked his use of the word devout.
And it's a great word choice for him because it's still respectful, but it lets you know that the devout, their belief is buoyed by something a little more beyond belief itself, like like that there's an energy supporting that belief in devotion to it. That is that itself is a word to break down devotion, right? So I really like that because it's a very thoughtful quote. And when you do look at those in our historical past, like Newton, that were exploring and looking for things. Even if you look at Freud and his pursuit of knowledge, there was a certain desperation to explore everything, within the metaphysical world. And alchemy was not a cartoon construct, it was very much part of the creative process of exploring. And it also acknowledged the creative element of what exploring is, because not only do you have to venture into the unknown, but then you have to name it, right? You have to organize it into, and sometimes to do that, you have to pre-name it and predetermine what it is you think you're going into.
Well, you have to have you have to have your hypotheses.
You need a hypothesis for sure.
Supposedly.
So there's you can phrase it historically and understand it as part of that sort of cultural belief system that we've kind of backed away from, but those elements still exist in our own, but exist in, we'll call it, in sort of fringe devotion more than they do sort of in mainstream acceptance. Although we have obviously examples of mainstream.
But I think that
problematize today.
That's part of the reason why the quote just blew me away, because it made me think a lot about grand unified theories. Because even now, there's a momentum of pushback in physics against trying to sink money and time and energy into grand unified theories.
Right.
So even in that realm, it's...
And what's interesting about that too, especially if you look at it from a human perspective, right? How much more do we actually need to know about that shit?
What shit?
The grand unified theories.
You mean what, physics?
Yeah, beyond what
standard model and that?
Beyond what we know now in terms of like waking up in the morning and being able to provide food and shelter for yourself and your loved ones. How much more do we need to know about how the universe was formed or how everything interrelates?
Right.
Versus, I need to find some food for my table today. So
and that's why I love having these conversations with you, because I think what you're saying might, to some people, they might, depending on their architecture of meaning, you might actually be really threatening to pull the rug out underneath them.
Yeah, except that I pose that as a question, not as saying this is what I believe. But
But it's an amazing question, because isn't there how human beings, to me, we seem to have a propensity to have to justify, characterize, and define every single moment and create a spreadsheet out of it. Right? This was the greatest moment of my life.
Yeah.
This wasn't. But then all of these experiences and all of these moments inform who you are, even when you are washing the dishes.
Sure.
Even when you go to the bathroom.
Well, and they also, to get back to it, that pursuit of the unknown and is that creative element is very much at the heart of what I think it is that I privilege in my concept of being is we as human beings, we create things. So we can't not but seek knowledge or information or try to create a representation of it in the best of our ability at the time, so that in so many ways all our thoughts and concepts are as much art as they are science, and science and art really aren't separate things. No, they're the same in that regard.
And I part of the reason why I wanted to read this quote to you and how it relates to the album Hounds of Love is because one of the to open the heart space of Joël a bit.
Sure.
One of the things in my architecture of meaning is that I always hold space for mystery. And to me, mystery is not about something I'm going to get the answer to. It's just I won't.
Yeah.
There will always be a halo or a space or a dimension of my experience of being that will be mystery.
Yeah.
And opening myself up to that was a very profound moment in my life. Huge. And it plays hand in hand with experimentation, exploration, which is probably why I say it more than any other two words. But with the album, Hounds of Love, I feel that there's something about that acknowledgement of mystery that's there.
Yeah.
And when I saw this quote, when I read the book, mystery in the story is played differently. But in that quotation, there's almost like there's this very epistemological moment with mystery. It's going to be less than what you create it to be, but it's going to be more than what people think is the epitome of knowing things.
Right.
So it doesn't even have a localization on the chart.
Yeah. Well,
it's gone.
Yeah.
And so I think when we were having our conversation for this album,
sure,
I have to admit that that feeling about mystery, I wanted to really find ways to characterize it,
right, and bring
and
it
I
in.
can. It's mystery,
yeah.
But and that's what I really appreciated about what you said, how you were looking at it. And you mentioned Heidegger, and you drew on some Jungian ways of looking at it, but I wanted to throw the quote into the mix. So,
well, I love it, and I similarly thought about reading the novel. I just didn't have time.
Yeah, I really had to push.
Yeah,
to finish. I had to push to finish it.
Yeah, my my wife and I had an experience just 2 days ago, or maybe yesterday, and we were sitting on the couch in the living room and listening to some music, and we were both reading at the same time. So, and
that's nice.
Yeah, and she looked up at me and she said, "This is what I thought our life would be like, listening to music together and reading in the shared space." And I looked at her and I said, "It's a good life." And she said, "It is a good life." And in that moment was so affirming, but it was also a little bittersweet too, because I've texted you a couple things, but I had a health scare a few weeks ago that saw me go to the hospital with chest pains.
Right.
And my father died at my age.
Right.
Of a heart blockage, arterial blockage, and so, as soon as I had these chest pains, I had to have a little conversation with myself about what should I do in this moment? Am I going to, sort of like brush it off, or, and I took myself or my wife drove me to the hospital, and, long story short on the heart stuff is that, my heart's A-okay, as in fantastic. Tests up the wazoo. Although they didn't go up the wazoo, but tests and blood tests and scans and all that kind of stuff.
They may as well have.
Yeah, they might as well have. But the flip side of that is that while they were scanning me, they found tumors, and I have tumors on my thyroid, a large one. And I've got some things going on with my liver. Most likely the liver stuff is just old cysts from, a legacy of third world travel and living. And, there's lots of things that the liver does to respond to infection and parasites and all that kind of stuff. So my assumption there is that's nothing. The tumor on my thyroid is very possibly cancer. So, we're in the process of investigating that, and at a minimum, there's a surgery coming up because the tumor's going to need to be removed regardless of what it is. But as we've sort of explored what this means, suddenly. The finiteness and the jeopardy of one's life is suddenly on the table. And so in that moment when my wife looked at me and sort of said, "This is a good life," there was a joyousness of that, where and also I could, like a sadness, that, this is a good life, but, it could be gone.
Yeah.
And I felt sad for her, sad for me in that moment. And, but that, there's that feeling I had when she said that to me, when she looked at me with that sort of like warmth and just the tone of her voice, that meant everything to me in that moment. Like it really did seem like, this is perfect. This moment is like, I don't need anything more than this. This is it. And there was just that little moment. And so, that's, its own clearing of being, right? Its own little moment of experience. And so, what is that? And what was that? Here's something that I'm saying fundamentally is possibly the most important and precious thing, in so much that I wanted, sort of describe it as the goal of re-experiencing for the rest of my life. And yet does it even exist in any kind of like, scientific formulation? Like, what is that?
I think I appreciate you bringing this up. And just as an aside, we don't have to put this out there if you don't want to. But talking about it is talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Along with that whole piece about mystery, is experience.
Yeah.
Human beings work so hard to think things through.
Yeah.
And I would say one of the greatest teachers of my life has been my relationship with music. And one of the things that took me longer than I would care to admit is that it just feels good. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I was recently at a celebration of life on Tuesday, and there with my mom is her nursing friend's husband passed away. And I always go to celebrations of life when I can, because the experience of them is important. And I've learned through music Alan Watts has a great way to, I love how he talks about things. And one thing he says about the universe
Yeah.
is that it's a dance.
Sure.
And the thing about dancing or music is it's not about getting to the end. The universe is like how you put it, the universe is not trying to get anywhere. But we are always trying to get somewhere. We always are trying to get to work on time. We're always trying to get dinner ready on time. We're always trying to be successful at this. And it just goes on and on. But that's not how things work. So he used the example of a symphony. Said if music worked that way, everyone would just go to hear the last chord played, and then everyone would leave.
Right.
You have to, and that's one of the other things I've loved about getting to know you and our conversations about music is you again and again, as much as I do, bring up the visceralness, the experience of music.
Yeah.
And I think that I mentioned it a little bit before about how, we tend to want to grade life, right? This is when it was the best, this is when the worst. And I'm not saying that people should let themselves be abused. I'm not saying that people should allow themselves to be hurt and to be to willingly put themselves through pain. But that's the mystery piece.
Yeah.
Because like with music, the hardest moments I've had in playing music was because I thought they were hard. The most uncomfortable moments I've had playing music is because I thought they should be uncomfortable. I wasn't where I was when things were happening. And I do my best to keep my heart open to the knowing, at least for myself, that every human life is full of riddles and revelations. And like you were saying in the episode, there's a creative life is we create.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would go so far as to say it's co-creative, because you're not going to create much if the earth isn't spinning the way it is right now.
True.
You're going to be creating different things.
Yeah.
So for me, I would just add that there's a co-creative piece to that is not just about other people. It's about the microphones we're using. It's about the desk that's here. It's the oxygen in the air. That's mysterious. It's mysterious that all of this enabled us to have an amazing conversation about a love supreme.
Yeah.
For all I know, at some point in my life, I might think that could be one of the greatest conversations I've ever had. But then it wouldn't actually be true, because I had to get to the conversation. And then I had to live to the point of thinking that was the greatest conversation I ever had. So I think it's so beautiful that you have that moment with Nar. But from me to you, that moment includes everything.
Right.
Because
it's only that moment because of everything it took for us to get there. And
then your own awareness.
Yeah.
Like if she hadn't turned to you and said that, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. But you would have still had, theoretically, you would have still had the moment. But just going back to that thing about experience, to experience life, not think about it, experience it. And so the album, Hounds of Love, that's why so many of the things you said, I would love to open them up and look at them, not to criticize them, but to simply reveal how everything's multidimensional. Yeah. Everything has a multiplicity to it.
Well, and that was one of the, as I sat down listening to the album, there's a couple things that really jump out at me from what you just said is that there's this part of me that just wants to say, I don't want to talk about the album. I don't want to talk about this, because I just experienced it in so many different ways over the course of so much time that it almost seems it's not that it's a betrayal, because that's even too simple of an idea. It almost seems that anything else is moot. Like in comparison to the totality of that experience and the uniqueness of all those experiences, and multiplicity is definitely the word to use, because as soon as I start to I look at my notes, I'm going to apply a little bit of a Jungian take on this, and I'm going to look at what hounds traditionally mean, and I'm going to talk about the Hounds of Love, and I'm going to talk about women and sexuality and being dominated or surrendering to, and like once you start to get into this or components, male and female components of the psyche, like suddenly I've reduced it and limited it and to try to define this one experience. And that's okay in so much as you're still, trying to place it in the totality of multiplicity. Right. But that's not what happens in most conversations, right? And you get very myopic and then you get very sort of territorial and you're, because in order sometimes to follow the arc of that through the through line of a thought through something, you are carving it through, and you have to kind of, be almost militaristic with it,
right.
and or imperial with it.
And it's like Bruce Lee quoted Taoism about this, that what I think you're talking about is that it's like a finger pointing at the moon. Don't look at the finger.
Yeah.
Look at the moon. Right? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that we tend to look at the finger.
Right.
We don't just take in the moon.
Right. Because exactly. So, you're trying to bring attention to what you're talking about without having people focus on what you've said about what you're talking about, or how you've said it about what you're talking about. You're just trying to find some language to reveal another experience of something.
Right.
Yeah.
And as an inclusion into that is the momentum for me of today's conversation was we were talking.
Yeah.
It was not what we were talking about.
Right.
The thrill of talking to Rob was the momentum.
Yeah.
So then, well, what do you talk about? Well, lots of things.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, that the idea of bringing in ideas, and then ideas into ideas, and that's why I, when I was listening to Hounds of Love, whenever I felt overwhelmed, really, there were moments. Like the first time I listened to Hello Earth, and that choral piece comes in, the name of which I still can't remember right now. I cried.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I'm crying, but I'm glad that I'm crying, and it feels right. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that will give insight later, I don't know. And I think that too, the what you were talking about with the development out of childhood, and the word complex isn't even right for that. Like it's there. There's just so much. And I didn't even go there when I was listening to the album.
Yeah,
I didn't even go there. That's not really so. To me, it was more of I settled into that idea of love itself, right? So that's what I'm bringing into it. And I also feel this also didn't come up in the episode, but I'm also very much, I believe very deeply in getting out of my own way. Things aren't going well creatively when I'm in the way. I'm trying to, right? I'm trying to make this or that. And so I believe that things come through me. I believe that things come through people if you allow it to.
Yeah, yeah.
Which opens up a whole other conversation for stuff, which I'm very comfortable getting into. But I feel that in this album, there are things that showed up that I wonder if even Kate Bush knows what they're about.
Well, I think the answer to that is, of course, right? Like, I mean, it can't not, because, no author can control or define the experience of a thing.
But do you feel that that's what people want? They want to control and define, or do you think they want to yield to?
It depends on the author.
On those, what's the word he used? Those invisible forces.
It depends on the author.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, you can. There are, that's how you can get a fascist work of art, right? That's how you can get a, like you can get, different authors have different approaches and strategies, but it also doesn't mean that they also don't reveal in that attempt so much more, right? And so for me, I don't think there's anything that Kate Bush wouldn't be open to sort of like or surprised that came from her work, like a perspective. She may not have the awareness of, or have that in her mind, and she would probably privilege someone else's. She would probably be very gracious in her sort of encouragement for people to find what they find in it. But without a question, she, when you sit down and this is interesting because there's this part, like, how much intent is behind, like how much of the intellectual attempt is behind the qualitative intent or the aesthetic attempt of her vocalizations, right? So like, when she's sitting as the person, just like a painter, creating color together, that painter might not be going, I'm about to create a color that's going to evoke this mood.
Right.
They just happen to create the color that evokes the mood that is in sympathetic to for whatever reason that they found themselves putting that on the canvas. So I like to think that as she's building these works of art and she's adding qualities and aesthetic elements to it, and that it's not because she's a guiding principle and she's authoring it along that line, but that what is sort of converging around her, from her experience and her artistic intuition, and compulsion in the moment, will be they can't help but being products of her psyche, products of her mood, products of her artistry. So if she's sort of orientated towards a creative orientation, then yes, the work will have that orientation, but it'll have so much more as well. And it doesn't, and it may not have any articulation, which is partly like when you look in how much of the speech was cut up and how it was backwards and foreign language and it was, and cut ups as well in the little soundbites, is that, all those elements were mood creation. And there's definitely some, some specificity behind, like, I'm going to do this in this way, like some, we'll call it craftsmanship, behind that, that she may have been able to tap into to say, because of this. Yeah. But the overall project of that just shows that, like that the words themselves even were less important as words than they were to be sounds or to be, elements of this piece that, I mix, and by cutting them up and changing moods and evoking things, I mean, there were some stellar stuff, stellar songcraft and just
like at the end of Running Up That Hill, where it sounds like a male and a female voice bonded together. It's a brilliant choice. Yeah. Brilliant choice. And so then in itself, you could say that it supports what you may identify out of that piece of music. Right. But then it also maybe adds another spin to it.
Well, yeah, and like, just again with the sort of the multiplicity of that, part of that, the wanting to change with someone and feel the other side, there was, and what was she going to do with that? Well, she was going to run up that hill. She was going to run up that building. She was, what's the other thing?
She was going to run up that hill, run up that road.
Yeah, run down that road and run up that building, right?
Which changes later.
Yeah, but why couldn't she do that then? Like, what did she need to be male to run up that road and up the building? And down,
Well, I think lyrically there's a hint.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's if it's true or not. But later on, it's running up that hill, running up that road with no problems. So running up the building is
Right.
that's defying physics.
Yeah.
How do you run up a building? So
Yeah.
whenever I thought, I mean, I might have been misunderstanding, but running up a building, does she mean inside the building or up the side of the building?
Right.
So it almost felt to me like the request is acknowledging, I am asking you to break the rules of the world, of the universe, so that I get what I'm asking for.
Right.
And what she wants is no problems.
Well, yeah.
Like that was one way that I interpreted it.
No problems or no barriers. Right.
Well,
like,
see that, but then we get into the question of what do you mean by a problem?
Yeah. Sure,
But so here's let's see where this takes us.
Yeah.
The thing I learned from music about getting out of my own way that I mentioned, the next piece to that for me, which is something I endeavor to live into as often as I can, is getting out of my way all the time. Not just when I play music. It's all the time. So if I'm in a conversation with someone I love and I feel a problem coming, can I get out of the way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean.
And I quite honestly, I have really worked on this, and I really feel like I have made strides with it, but still working on it. But when that line gets changed from running up a building to no problems, that to me was it's almost like, and I don't know if this is the intention of the song, this is just where this conversation is taking me.
Yeah.
Is that it's the ego again. It's the ego saying, look, I don't want to deal with shit. I want everything to be perfect. Now I recognize that what I'm about to say has a saccharine element to it.
Okay.
But how do you know that what's going on is really that bad? In that moment, like whatever it would be, like I was saying, okay, like I feel like a problem is coming.
Right.
But when I listen to that song, Running Up That Hill, there's it's interesting that it's a hill, especially because there's that in the Book of Dreams. There's stuff about running up a hill, but that takes effort. But it takes effort if you think you don't want to do it, right? I got to run up that hill. But when you were a kid,
yeah,
you go run everywhere. And so the momentum of the act of running up a hill, running up that road, running up that building,
right,
and along with that request of asking God to do something that is not supposed to happen, is almost like I don't want to get in the way, right? I want God to intercede, let's say, with this is my idea of it. You know, it's like that. There's that idea where this is a joke,
right?
That if you want to annoy God, tell him your plans, right? Like this is what I think. This is how I think things can be perfect,
right?
As opposed to just witnessing what's going on,
right?
And not. It's not very clear, I know to say, but not get in the way.
It's interesting, this song, like we jump in kind of, we don't start at the beginning.
No,
right?
That's right.
So we jump in the middle of a relationship, or seemingly, into the middle of a relationship problem.
Yeah.
So, a woman struggling, and the questions, and there's, by implication, there's something she's not allowed to do or can't accomplish as a woman that seems to be needing, that the male isn't encumbered by. And that's part of the motivation for the flip in that moment,
Right.
where, the male's militaristic, we march down roads, we run up hills, right? Very, very war minded. Hounds of Love itself is very dogs of war. It's got it. Aside from its Jungian hounds of love and hounds, there's a martial element to this. Absolutely. And there's something in that moment that she, for whatever reason, feels she can't do.
Yeah.
In that moment that we're halfway, we start mid-story kind of thing, that looks to be equated to a gender politic thing, right? And she's angry in this. She's herself expressing violent imagery and violence. Sort of. There's this element of where she wants to tear him asunder, and can pull out the component parts of him. But I like your idea but if you then go back into her childhood self, and is that really it's only where running up that hill is easy and running down that road is easy. Something happened or was happening in her conception of her journey into womanhood that suddenly limited her and frightened her and scared her. And whether it was because the personification of masculinity being martial, being possessive, and being, and possibly, like when you look at her history of young girl, older man stuff, within what we know of her, whether it's platonic or actually sexual, that power dynamic shift, definitely had her sort of, possibly submissive or possibly subservient to a certain male sexual dynamic that she was working through, possibly. But I like to think of it maybe more so in that just something was lost in her conception of self as she moved into womanhood and had to deal with the idea of partnership and sexual partnership with a man that had her temporarily lose sight of the freedom that she had as a child.
It's really interesting how you're characterizing this, because granted, there was only a few snippets of her talking about this album, but the way she talked about the role reversal, she spoke about it very, very lightly. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could just see from each other's perspective?
Yeah.
Now,
I actually don't buy that in this song, like in the sense that was the intent behind the song, as in, wouldn't it be great? I think it was deeper than that. I think,
I know. I'm just saying in the interview.
Yeah.
It was a very light, and of course,
I
I wouldn't put everything on an interview that is being broadcast because you got a mic in front of your face. But I think that for me, I have a tendency to default to, for lack of a better way of putting it, macro thinking.
Right.
So this switching of roles, the idea of switching of roles, even though you were talking about how there's an allusion to some kind of injury, and then or more than an allusion to an injury, but there's also, to me, there's
well, how deep the bullet lies. There's that line.
So what's the bullet?
What's the bullet, right?
Yeah.
And my question there was, who hurt you?
Exactly.
But that's a superficial question because you know what? We're all hurt. So the answer of who hurt you is sort of like...
Which is why I would go to a macro perspective on, a lot of things, because it's even the thought of that.
Yeah, you're not going to figure it out by saying, "Oh, it was her headmaster when she was 14." That
but where I'm going is that, okay, what if I said to you, I would really like to know what you're experiencing right now. Okay. So, and I ask you, and you will tell me it won't be it.
Right.
Right. I feel relatively sure about that.
Yeah.
But where did the desire to ask that question come from? Why does that matter? That's what I mean about going a little bit more macro. So
Sure.
So
Well, it gets back to what we talked about the last song, you know, and the you know the sort of and the question that you posed about the other person, you know, like once you isolate your sense of being, you know, the curiosity then is there's 7 billion people on the planet, and I've just had this very unique individual epiphany moment of getting in touch with whatever being is for me, you know.
Yeah.
There's 7 billion more of these happening right now.
It doesn't include every other experience.
And so that mystery, I mean, is a poetic mystery, you know, and so what you can look at this song even whimsically in that sort of playing with the poetic of it, right? You know, the poetic of that.
Sure.
You know, there's also sort of mythological and you know, sort of images here. You know, I thought of Sisyphus, right, and the hill. You know, and then all roads lead to Rome, and running down that road. So, like, you know, I did kept going back to this sort of like, you know, I think there really was something sort of about defining self in the moment through you know what this when you talk about getting a way of herself. I think you could say she was in her own way here. Right. You know, like
well, that's what I guess in a way I'm kind of alluding to that, because I think I can probably allude to it for all of us for most of the time.
Right.
But yeah.
But so through writing this song and singing this song, and you do have that sort of catharsis at the end, you know, is her sort of reconciling that, you know, because it wasn't, you know, the dude or the guy, you know, the problem. What was one that she was carrying or she had manifested, you know, like it doesn't seem to be a bad guy per se.
Well, and that's what I didn't take. I took the song to be a lot more about more like A plus B equals C as opposed to 1 plus 2 equals 3.
Right.
Like
okay.
I found that there was for me, listening to this song, but I do think that, I mean, she's writing from some personal experiences, whatever they may be. But I felt that I went with it in a much more open sense. In that she probably, like, she was injured, but if you feel like you've been shot, sometimes the other person doesn't realize it.
Right.
You know?
Well, and there's something that came to me also, like in the second song, where I go back to a little bit of biography, in the sense that, you know, from my recollection, I may be wrong, and although I don't think it throws too much of a wrench in my conceptualization of this, but she comes from a certain privilege, and as a young person, privileged through, you know, and supported by her parents, and her parents were part of getting her in touch with Gilmore, and there was support.
I didn't know that piece.
There was, you told us, I
just heard that there was someone said you ought to listen to
someone
this.
Knew someone who the daughter of their friend, kind of thing,
like that,
and but that the coming together of that, you know, was certainly what, you know, was managed, or at least was something that was possible.
Right.
With them because of them, you know, but as a young person, I get the sense that she that sort of non-gendered in a way, and that it was, so part of that, part of what she's struggling with as she's gotten older is that instead of being the child where loved and supported and everything was possible, that something was lost in the sort of the gendering of self, and the transforming into adult female role, and so I've got this sort of idea that the Hounds of Love and the pursuit of reintegrating the self with the childhood concept of self, which included both male and female in the sense that she didn't feel lack of possibility at that point.
Okay.
And so and it worked in for a more neater bookend to me to see her kind of gender bend at the last song, and sort of see for her, the child and this sort of longing for integration that she thought was gender based in the first two songs at Big Sky comes together. Oh, I just want to be the kid again. That's and as the child. So it sort of was, it was initially expressed as a gender issue that really came back to a child, where that sort of unified anime kind of thing, animus was.
Another way that I perceived it was just kind of in a very, in terms of perception.
Yeah.
Like that word I used before, multidimensional or dimensions, where what if I could see from your perspective, what about these things that are coming after me? This is how I see the sky. That there's also a lot of play with perception. And in discernment of experience, I think that there's some places that you've gone with, I'll just call it like an analysis, that I'm totally open to, but at the same time, like we were talking about before, it kind of pulls out of the visceral experience of it now.
I know,
I can feel it's interesting. It's interesting, but I think it's really interesting to talk about. I
do get that, and which is why I have none of that for side two. Like for the second side, and you might find this interesting. So,
okay,
you might
maybe
I had a hard time getting into this album.
Okay.
But more specifically, I had a hard time with side two.
Okay. Why was that?
Well, when I started playing the album, and side two, when I first started playing the album, I just had to leave it. I had to go back to side one and find my way through side one. I had to build a relationship there with Kate Bush in that first side, and try and make some sort of sense of that as the Hounds of Love, and try and find my way through that. And it took me a couple of weeks to get and orientate within that, where I really sort of felt it as a unified side, like where I really was comfortable with this. And then I moved to side two, right? And thinking, wow, side one is just great. I've got my orientation here, and I'm experiencing this in lots of different ways, and here's some ways, and I can go to side two now. The first thing I had problems with on side two was that first song, right? Because it's so musical theater, it's so Frozen or Phantom of the Opera. So sonically, I resisted that style at first, and to the point where it when I first was listening to the album through, I got there and it just stopped me. Right.
That's interesting.
So, but once I got through that first side and got into the second side, I was somehow able to just kind of let that first song function as all those musical tropes are there and I just let it be, sort of it was almost cliched in its tropisms.
I get that. I get what you're saying.
But you take it to that point where it closes out and you drop into the next song, and once you get to, it's Under the Ice, right?
Yeah. Under Ice.
Under Ice, yeah. Under Ice, immediately I like that song. Like suddenly it opened up to me, right? But I had to be able to get dropped into it. And at first I just couldn't. I couldn't buy surrendering to that first song and to go through where it was supposed to take me.
And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate you saying this, because that evokes a big piece of what happens in a Book of Dreams. This man trying to find ways to drop in
Right.
to what has happened. So what I appreciate about what you've just said is that it also reflects the command of what you have said about the first suite.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this as like a competitive sense at all. Like, I did not need to do what you've just said, right? For me, it's the last track. It's just, I need a minute before it starts. But I found the first suite, I didn't have to do that. And we could speak for hours probably about why that is.
Yeah.
But what I appreciate you saying that is that it evokes something about the album, about working through things. Because where is Kate Bush with this album now? Where is Kate Bush with this process? And it's the same thing in Book of Dreams. Like, Book of Dreams is great because it actually has a kind of similar structure to the album. So I feel maybe that she drew from the structure of the book, whether it was subconscious or conscious, that the first part, it's very deliberate in its structure. But the second part, it gets much more amorphous as to where you're going to be, what point in the story you're at.
Yeah.
And that's where you feel like things are being really processed. Where in the first part, where there's those things that happened in his childhood, it's much more about, it's almost like a statement of what happened. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then in the second or the later part of the book, it starts to become a lot more bendy with time and perception, because more of that, it feels like more of that processing is happening. But in the processing, one of our favorite words, it becomes more fractal.
Yeah.
Because you've got non-integer dimension now.
Yeah.
It's not 1, 2, 3. It's 3.97. It's 6.24. Right. So,
well, and that's my experience with Waking the Witch. Like at first, again,
I love that track.
My first listen through, I saw this as like I almost said to myself, like, yeah, maybe you should have just made a film, Kate. You know, like why is this? You know, this is just your film thing, and
Interesting.
Because I hadn't dropped in, so all this felt very, very twee, very
Twee?
yeah, sort of
I don't know what that means.
Precious. It felt very precious and twee's sort of a lighter version of precious in a way. Like I thought.
Maybe I need you to open up Precious too. What do you mean by that?
Precious in its sort of Victorian conceit, like cultivated with sort of like delicate value.
So you mean kind of like piano skirting?
Yeah,
to cover the legs.
Yes.
That kind of precious.
Yeah, that kind of precious. It just felt like young white privileged girl being supported by her mom and dad and gifted or somehow acquires a relationship with these guys, and they're all supporting her artistry. It felt I couldn't drop into that second side because of that first song.
But that's why it's there.
I know. So, but like I said, once I'd worked once I'd worked through, side one and sort of got my sea legs a bit, and going into side two, my experience of all the stuff that looked to me very sort of obvious, like, the sound, the cut ups and the sound stuff and all this narration that I thought was like, oh yeah, I could imagine someone just like, where it didn't work for me until I could drop into it. When I did drop into it, it like that's the fractals. That's where the witch was wakened. That's where the creativity somehow that something that I had thought, oh, isn't that nice kind of thing became like magic.
So this is a question.
Yeah.
I'm not outing you.
No.
It's a question.
Okay.
Would you say you got in your own way?
Oh, I very much got in my own way. It was me, right? Like that's what, and I love that. That's kind of, that's come up now through this discussion and the last, yeah, absolutely. It was me getting in my own way. Because I was holding on to the sides of to prevent myself from dropping. I was and my sort of my prejudice, my dislike of that first song as and dismissal of it on the second side, just prevented me from being able to fall in. So I heard everything. Oh, there's the dramatic thing. This is the Nina Hagen. Oh, this is the plain chant. This is the Gregorian thing. This is this. So all this stuff was just sort of like cut and paste elements of things I'd recognized that just kind of didn't congeal for me, and so therefore there was no power there.
Yeah.
But like you say, like getting out of your own way, surrendering to it, allowing yourself to fall, allowing myself to be isolated in that tank, like she was setting up in that first song. So instead of fighting it, I just surrendered to it.
Yeah. And
then that made side two my favorite side. Like my experience with side two, I'm still, I don't have words like I have words for side one.
That's clear.
Yeah, it was pure experience for me. Like it was, I just, every listen is.
Would you say then, because I'm really curious about your process, but I don't want to feel like I'm putting a light in your eyes and saying, where were you on such and such a date? Do you feel then that what I was saying in a simplistic terms is that the first suite is kind of a surface, and then the second one is a plunge?
Yeah, like that when you talked about it that way, I didn't look at it as surface. I looked at it as, when you say surface, I get that, but not because it's simple, but because it's the immediate. I'm dealing with these things that I and a story and a narrative, and I'm making connections, and I did that, which then dropped me into a level of sort of psyche and sort of imagery and stuff like that. But it started out with Apollo. It started out with being engaged by the specific theme of that sort of obvious theme of each song, sort of thing, and as I dropped in, then it developed into a deeper narrative and a more unified narrative. But the initial engagement with it was on that surface level narrative.
I love what we're talking about, because we're talking about what we bring in, and it compels me to share a story of something that this album I connected with for my own narrative.
Yeah.
A number of years ago, I was working through a depression.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is go with multiplicity. So I had a number of things to help me with that. And there was this one night in particular where I woke up and the anxiety and the beating of my heart was monumental And I was lying in bed and thinking, I don't know what to do. Like all the things that I've been doing have been helping, but I'm at a point. And as will certainly be revealed in future conversations, I'm sure, I have a very strong, which maybe some people might call mystic bend, which has served me incredibly well. And so I'm lying in bed, and I actually said, I don't know what to do. I said it out loud. What do I do? And I shit you not, heard a voice. The voice said, it's time for cold water therapy. Go into the shower. Hard, cold water. Now, this was in like November, late November. It's already cold in the basement.
Right. The groundwater is very cold.
So what I heard in my mind was go into the shower, cold water therapy, because your heart is not centered. So I could feel my heart like it was beating out the side of my body. And my breathing was all up in my chest. You know, in decades of martial arts, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
And yoga, that's just wrong. So it was go into the shower, cold water, and be naked. And the actual line was, as I remember it, be naked before it. You need to be naked before it. So I go into the shower, put the water on, and it hurt. It was so cold. Yeah, groundwater.
Yeah.
Why isn't it ice cubes?
Yeah.
Like that's how cold it was. And I put the water on, and the moment I put the water on, the exhilaration around the rest of my body was so uncomfortably captivating. And I was just breathing deep, breathing deep, breathing deep, breathing deep, breathing deep. And as I'm experiencing this, I don't even know where my heartbeat is now.
Yeah.
I'm not even aware of it. My whole body is viscerally screaming out with this cold water.
Yeah.
And then the most beautiful thing happened. I'm there and I'm breathing, and this luminescence. And as I said, we'll probably talk about this stuff more. I have quite an extensive life of exploring dream states and altered states of consciousness. And so seeing light or types of light is not a surprise. But what was great about this was that it was this white luminescent ball beaming from within me, and the water got colder. And then as the water got colder, the feeling of the water started to retreat, and this other feeling started to come in. And then the voice was, just let it in. Just let it in. And I did. And you know what I started doing? Laughing out loud.
Yeah. Awesome.
I was rapturous, laughing. It was amazing. There wasn't cold water.
Yeah.
And then I came out of it, and I was just so pleased. I was just like so joyous. And there was that last little bit in my head that just basically said, yeah, there'll be more. This is not the pill.
Yeah.
This is not the secret answer to everything.
Right.
It's just what you needed now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in listening to this album and in listening to the Ninth Wave, that is one way that I kind of connected with that light and the water and the solitude.
Yeah.
And the other piece about it that I fully admit that sometimes it's not that I can't have compassion. It's not that I can't sympathize. But I truly believe that humor is embedded in everything. Like there's just humor humor is almost like a property of existence.
Yeah.
It's the best way I can put it. Hopefully I'll find better ways. But I had that experience because of the other hard things that I went through.
Right.
And listening to the Ninth Wave, and even how jarring I find that last track, I feel like I get it. Just like you were talking about at the beginning, it has these kinds of cliched, these tropes of bringing you into something. But that's what enables the dive. And then once you've done the dive enough, those tropes change.
Yeah.
And then you see them. And then, like, now when I listen to the Ninth Wave, I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. I can see that wave coming. It's just that the wave doesn't look the same as when it's on you.
Right.
When you're tossing and turning in it. It looks different. It's got light beaming off the top of it. It's far away.
Yeah.
But when it's on you, when you're in it, it's not the same thing.
This reminds me a little bit of what I know of hypnotism, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Canada's favorite hypnotist, the man they call Ravine.
This is the second time you've mentioned him.
Oh, really?
Yes, you mentioned him in another episode.
Oh my God. I had no idea.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I think you did.
Yeah. Aside from having an impressive head of hair, the man they call Ravine, who looked like Wolfman Jack, like in whenever you watch hypnotism on TV, there's that guy takes out the pocket watch and he's going, "You're getting sleepy."
Yeah.
So I experienced that first song like the guy watching that hypnotist doing that thing. Oh God. Oh God.
I get it.
Here comes the hypnotist, and what they say about hypnotism, because some people can't or don't, seem to be resistant to it. And when you talk about getting out of your own way, that's the thing that is resistant to it. So me sitting there going, "Oh, look at this clown with the pocket watch," right?
Yeah.
Or, "Oh God, Kate Bush doing really bad musical theater." Like in that moment, oh, here comes this is right out of Frozen, or right out of
Andrew
Phantom
Lloyd
of
Webber.
Phantom of the Opera. I was the guy it was me with that experience, with that eye view on that song, or that ear on that song, that was just saying, yeah, no, and I couldn't drop. I couldn't drop. And I had to find a way to move myself out of the way, and somehow for me, the process to that was working through that first side, and I think developing not an intimacy with a certain conception of Kate Bush, so I allowed, so like I didn't just something that then that sort of disarmed me a bit and allowed me to surrender to what she might have happening in that song and let it happen. And it didn't take too long once I was able to start listening to side two to get the drop. And it happened over maybe the course of about 5 listens to where suddenly, I dipped in, I dipped my toe in a few things and was like, oh, this song is cool because it's Kashmir, right? It's 3/4 and it's dun 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 dun, dun. Like it's Carmina Burana meets Kashmir. Okay, great. Like I was going a little bit in, but I hadn't dropped yet. But when I did drop, all that stuff was just I've talked about this before. I was William Hurt in Children of a Lesser God, trying to convey through gesture the sound of music, or the experience of hearing music to Marlena Matlin.
Right.
And he was just sort of like gesturing and with his open mouth and with his body, and it was a beautiful interpretive dance.
Right.
And that's almost my own visualization of self when I'm experiencing music. I'm sort of I find myself almost pantomiming that kind of sort of like thing.
Those of you who can't see, Rob's really working his hands.
I'm working my hands and
He's really pushing out.
but not all that dissimilar from how you described that feeling of that light inside you. You did the same sort of thing. Sort of,
There's an emergent, expressive, But there's also the inward push, and then
the harnessing,
and contraction and expansion.
Yeah. So a very amazing experience. Another thing I loved about what
you mean my experience?
But absolutely. Okay. Another thing I love about what you said in that, there's, I'm no stranger to depression, and there was a book that I was reading that I kept having to put down because if I was so close to doing terrible violence to myself or just ending it all as I read this book and it was Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf.
Oh, really? Right? Interesting.
But I kept going back to it because first I identified with it so viscerally and vividly, but then it like as it was going through the narrative, like it was taking me way too close to except I finally was able to get through to the jazz and the point where he just throws his head back and laughs.
Yes.
Right? And when you talked about the laughing, that moment of laughter, after that, like once I finally was able to get there, because like the journey to that was so perilous for me.
Yes.
But once I was able to get through it and finally experience it, I had no idea that was there. And so, I didn't know where this was going to go, but I held, I kept reapproaching and
wow.
So like, I got it. In that moment, like again, that's not the answer of all, but often,
there's always more.
Often there's if something can get me to the point where I find myself laughing, like I found myself laughing. My wife and I laughed like hell, because, so I'm the real possibility here of having cancer, of the thyroid cancer. First, my wife's ex died of thyroid cancer. So that's been hanging, over us and different things. And so we took a little bit, it took a few days for us to start to talk about it a little bit and bring some stuff up.
Right.
And then to joke about it, we were walking and I was, she started talking about, she, like, listen, I'll shave my head if you if something comes and don't worry about that, like I'll be there. And I'm like, hell no. Like if I'm going to be cancer boy, I'm going to be cancer boy. And you're going to, I want my woman to be like, I don't want to be walking next to cancer girl. Like I'm cancer boy. You're,
wow.
We started to have some fun with it. And once we'd kind of worked through and talked everything out, we went home and we started to watch a show. And there's a show called The Midnight Club right now on one of the streaming services. I forget which one. Might be Netflix. And it's a sort of a ghost story series thing. We didn't know anything about it, but basically there's a girl, the main character, who's terminally ill, and she goes to a hospice where a bunch of other terminally ill kids are, and there's a whole story there. But, as we start watching this thing, what's she dying of? She's dying of thyroid cancer, and we just had to laugh. Like it was like, that like that, because the comedy in that moment was real. It was visceral, and it was buoyant. And the other thing I wanted to mention in part of what you talked about, was, like I love Milan Kundera and the unbearable lightness of being. I love that. And that idea, that lightness of being, you touched on that earlier, and I wanted to sort of quickly tie it into that because, there is a buoyancy, right?
Oh, yes.
And,
yes.
And part of that, and again, the theme of getting out of your own way, like the mass, your body's the weight, your self can, and your your self-construction
Yeah.
is weighted,
Yes.
right? But the buoyancy of it is the liberation from it,
I had an amazing lesson with an altered state of consciousness with psychedelics that taught me a few things. And one of the things that it taught me was that when a human being speaks, there are muscles that they engage in their bodies that they're not aware of. This is actually something that Wilhelm Reich, he's the father of body therapy, most likely. There's areas of the body where the muscles engage, and the one of the common ways to look at it now is called armoring, which I have found to be very valuable. It's like Newton. This is the gravity piece. This is a gravity piece for me. But in this state, in this experience, what I realized is that sometimes my desire to speak is not about speaking. It's I want to engage the muscle. So, for example, the belly. Having a conversation, some people are speaking, and I feel the impulse to speak. It's actually because the muscles in my stomach are engaged, and I'm fending something off. So by speaking, it deepens the justification for the muscle engagement. Whereas if I just relaxed, that muscle engagement would be gone, but I won't say anything. I wouldn't have spoken. So it's really interesting that along with that is big belly laugh.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So the laughter is a vocalization, most predominantly, but it involves your whole body. And so when you're light, when you're open, it's much easier to laugh.
Yeah.
It's much easier to laugh. And what I find too is that it's much easier to let things go on without you, right? Like those people are having a conversation. I have to join in. Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. And I find though, and this is really interesting to me, that when I have conversations with you, it's not like that. It's a little bit different. Like there's always muscle engagement.
Sure.
But like with you and some other people, the muscle engagement is different when I speak. And so what I learned from that is before I speak, I very quickly now will I don't even know how fast it is, but I feel parts of my body. Is this on? Is this muscle engaged? Is it not? And if the muscle is engaged, then, okay, it's telling me something.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So again, when I was reading A Book of Dreams, and when I was listening to the album, like How Deep the Bullet Lies, all these things that reflect the body. That came up for me too as nice little reminders, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. This has been an amazing conversation, and this second conversation, it's been even more amazing for me actually.
Me too.
I really appreciate it, and it's interesting just to think like the catalyst for this stuff. All these things are in us, all these thoughts and experiences, and just the catalyst of Kate Bush being able to participate in something that then sort of encouraged or inspired this conversation is kind of a neat thing. It's our own connection to Kate Bush.
Right, and she probably will never even know about it.
Yeah, I would hope she has more
pressing
things to do than search us out. But how cool is that? What is a work of art if it's not something to engage and allow you to reflect on your own journey through life and being.
When I was at Douglas College studying music, and there was a hallway of all the teachers' offices, and it was all the arts departments. The first door on the right when you go into this hall, when you entered it from the north side, was one of the drama teachers. And on the door was, a single tile cartoon. And it was, a primitive man characterization sitting on a stone, looking out into the vista, the horizon, and very ponderously putting their hand to their chin saying, I think I want to direct. Inspiration comes between us, for sure.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I think life itself, we're inspired by being here.
Yeah.
We're inspired by being human. And that inspiration is mysterious a lot of the time. But I'm with you there. Like sometimes I love just reflecting on the synchronicities and the lines and the connections, and just reflecting on them.
Yeah.
Not doing anything with them. Yeah. So maybe it'll get back to Kate. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's the creative life, right? It's we talked about the musical life, which is really, you can't just, it's not just about the music, it's a creative life. And
life itself.
And so many things are creative.
I would go so far as say everything.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it.
Yeah.
It's co-creative.
Yeah.
Right from everybody to grains of sand.
Right. Which means that in everything there's something that reaffirms life itself, right? Like that right. Process of creativity and is affirmed within, it's embodied within everything.
Yeah.
And so no matter what you're engaged in or struggling in or having ease with, it's all there as well, like at any given point in time. So if you need anything to affirm what it is and why you're here and what the meaning is, it's in everything you do.
Yeah.
And so and for me that's something that, again, getting out of your own way allows you to see sometimes, that sidestepping yourself just to remember, you don't have to have an all-encompassing philosophy of the universe to be able to do that. It can be just a very simple conception.
Or as Douglas Adams pointed out very brilliantly, the answer is 42. And the reason why the answer is 42 is because you're asking the wrong question.
Yeah.
So just in the sense that we have I think a lot of us, we have this capacity and desire to ask questions and get the answers. I think it's also important, at least for me, to remember that sometimes those questions are just helping me develop better questions. It's not necessarily about getting the answers.
Yeah.
It's just, refining that way, the wonderment piece. Maybe, actually, I would say not so much questions, but wonder.
Yeah. Well, remember, the question is the hypothesis, right? But all the work's in the process after that. So, the question is just really the starting point.
And the crazy part is that whatever I've found myself doing, there's always something else involved in it that I didn't account for, didn't see come. Like, and with these albums, we have yet to hit one that doesn't have this piece of, it just happened to be available, or this just happened to come together.
Right.
There's always those synchronicities or those relational moments that just they don't connect till well after they've already happened.
Yeah, there's an element of kismet with everything, right?
Yeah.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Very good conversation.
Awesome.
As always, I'm going to shake your hand.
Okay.
Across the table.
Let's do a better one than last time.
Yeah, and we'll hug it out.
Okay.